black woman got kicked out of an art exhibition. What happened next shocked everyone. A black woman, dressed simply, walked into the gallery like any ordinary visitor. She carried no wealth, no privilege, just the quiet dignity of being human. Yet the air froze. Eyes darted, whispers hissed. Then came the white manager's command, sharp and brutal. You don't belong here. Out. Laughter from some corners, silence from others. Her skin became her sentence, her presence a crime. That day, humiliation wasn't private, it was staged before a crowd too afraid to act. This is her story. If it grips you, don't look away, share it, subscribe, let her voice be heard. New York brags about being the melting pot. Tourists eat that line like candy. They take pictures in Times Square, stroll through Chinatown, buy bagels in Brooklyn and say, look, diversity. But ask any black woman in Harlem who dares to cross into downtown galleries, or high-rise boardrooms, or designer stores, and you'll learn fast. This pot doesn't melt everyone the same. Some float, others are burned at the bottom, left to scrape themselves out. Nia Elizabeth knew this long before tonight. 46 years carved it into her bones. She had mopped hospital blood at 3 a.m., stitched wounds of strangers who never once asked her name, and soothed the dying whose families would never shake her hand. She was a nurse, yes. But outside her scrubs, stripped of the badge that let her belong in sterile white halls, she was only what this city decided. Black, female, a shadow that better know its place. Still, she dreamed. And tonight, she dared. Her husband, Robert, a broad-shouldered man of 50, insisted she buy the dress. Navy blue, cut modestly but with elegance, cinched at the waist. He had worked overtime on construction scaffolds, knuckles raw, lungs full of dust, so she could wear it. She draped a scarf over her shoulders, red and gold silk, her one indulgence, bought after months of slipping dollars into an envelope she kept hidden beneath the mattress. Her hair, braided with silver beads, swayed like chimes when she moved. It wasn't vanity. It was survival. To walk into a Manhattan gallery without armor would be suicide, and silk, tonight, was her shield. The gallery air was cold, perfumed with expensive wine and entitlement. Chandeliers dripped crystal like icicles. White walls glared under bright lights, hung with canvases screaming to be understood. Nia stepped inside, spine straight, heartbeat pounding. Then came the first cut. Who invited her? Hissed a man by the champagne bar, voice sharp as broken glass. The second followed, quick and cruel. Look at that scar. Harlem chic, I guess. The third was delivered with a smirk. Must have maxed out her credit card. They didn't bother to lower their voices. That was the humiliation, open ridicule, cloaked incivility, sharpened by laughter that dripped like acid. Nia had known racism in hospital corridors, in subway stairs, in cops' eyes that lingered too long. But here, surrounded by marble floors and pearls, it cut different. It was refined violence, polished, practiced, centuries old. She tried to breathe, tried to anchor herself in the art. Before her, a painting exploded in orange and blue. Harlem streets, children with basketballs, women in Sunday hats, a block party alive with trumpets and tambourines. Home. Her mother's laughter, her father's tired smile, the scent of cornbread drifting from a neighbor's window. For a moment, the painting wrapped her in belonging. Then Marcus Thorne's voice sliced through, loud, confident, poison in velvet. She probably doesn't even get the art. Harlem's not exactly the Met. The room chuckled quietly, carefully enough to leave no fingerprints but plenty of wounds. Marcus looked at her the way men once looked at slaves on auction blocks, a body to measure, dismiss, reduce. His blue suit gleamed under gallery lights, his smile rehearsed for cameras, but his words were ancient chains polished for a new century. Nia's throat tightened, her stomach clenched. Every nerve screamed to leave, but she stood. She forced her eyes back to the Harlem canvas. You will not erase me. Robert caught her gaze across the room. His fists curled, his jaw tightened. He had carried bricks, steel beams, whole buildings on his back, but tonight he wanted only to carry her pain. Still, the cuts kept coming. A woman with diamonds dripping at her neck leaned in, tone sugar-coated, words soaked in venom. Lovely scarf, she said. Then the pause, the blade. Surprising choice. The laughter rose again, subtle, poisonous. Naya's fingers dug into her clutch. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, whispering of the South. Child, they'll let you serve at their tables, but never sit at them. She could see her mother's tired hands, raw from cleaning offices where her bosses never once said thank you. And now here she was, a nurse who had held white lives in her hands, treated them with dignity, only to be dressed down in silk, stripped bare in public. This wasn't about a scarf or a dress. It was about survival in a country that tells you every day, know your place. The gallery air grew heavier, the chandeliers above blurred. Nia clenched her jaw, her silence louder than any defense. Around her, the whispers buzzed like flies. Outsider, pretender, imposter. But inside her chest, another sound grew a storm. Not the storm of shame. That storm had been taught to her, inherited like scar tissue. No, this was older, deeper. The storm of her people. The storm of centuries. The storm that had marched in Selma, that had burned through Harlem uprisings, that had screamed through Billie Holiday's strange fruit. And for the first time tonight, Nia let it swell. She planted her feet on the marble as if planting them on Harlem's pavement, and thought, you will not erase me. Not tonight. Not ever. The room carried on, sipping wine, trading barbs, convinced they had cut her small enough to disappear. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that in trying to wound her, they had sharpened her. They had lit a fire no gallery wall, no chandelier light, no Marcus Thorne smile could contain. Because wounds like these do not heal. They fester, they deepen, and then, one day, they erupt. The room was bright, chandeliers dripping crystal light over velvet gowns and black tuxedos. The sound of champagne glasses chiming floated above a low hum of conversation. It was the kind of place where money whispered and power sat heavy in the air like expensive perfume. Nia stood there, wrapped in her emerald scarf, trying to breathe steady. For a brief moment she had believed she belonged, until Marcus Thorne decided to make her a spectacle. His laugh cut through the gallery like a whip. Heads turned instantly. It wasn't laughter of joy, it was the kind of laugh a predator makes when he's cornered his prey. He raised his glass, voice loud, showman slick. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus boomed, eyes locked on Nia. Isn't it fascinating when art draws in all sorts? The pause was intentional. A dagger wrapped in velvet. Eyes followed his cue, sliding toward her dark skin, toward her scarf, not one toward the art. Robert stiffened beside her, his jaw like stone. He knew better than to shout. In this room, his anger would mark him dangerous before it marked Marcus cruel. Marcus wasn't finished. He never was. Our guest here seems especially moved by the Harlem jazz piece, he said, gesturing to the painting of trumpets and tambourines. Perhaps she feels right at home. The words landed like blows. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not loud, not open, but sly. The kind of laughter that twists a knife deeper because it pretends to be nothing. Nia's ears burned. Her chest tightened, but she couldn't move. Pride anchored her feet to the marble floor. Marcus leaned closer, his smile widening. Tell me, he said, voice syrupy with mockery, do you even understand it? Or are you here simply to decorate the room? Gasps fluttered across the gallery, then silence. A silence so heavy it was complicit. Nia's throat closed. She wanted to shout back, to let the fury in her veins explode. I understand it more than you ever will. This music is my blood, my heritage, my pain, and my joy. I carried your sick. I stitched your wounds. I bore the brunt of this city while you pretended Harlem was just a stage for your culture to consume. But her voice failed her. The weight of centuries pressed it down, centuries where black women who answered back were fired, beaten, erased. The silence was broken not by her, but by the shuffling step of the gallery guard. He moved without needing words. Marcus's nod had summoned him. Power didn't shout, it commanded with glances. Ma'am, the guard said, tone flat, detached, I think you should leave. Nia felt the world tilt. Her heart shattered in her chest. The humiliation was so sharp, it stole the air from her lungs. She wanted to sink into the floor, vanish before their eyes. The scarf that had felt like armor now strangled her throat. Robert spoke then, voice low but trembling with rage. This is wrong. She's done nothing. She belongs here as much as any of you. Marcus's smirk curved sharper. He turned to the audience, delivering the line like theater. Belongs? This is a gallery, not a subway platform. The cruelty hung in the air. The crowd didn't laugh, but they didn't move either. Their silence was its own approval, a shield for Marcus's venom. The guard stepped closer, hand reaching, and in that touch, Nia felt every humiliation of her lineage her father shoved from a diner in Georgia, her mother clutching her hand tight in an elevator as white women recoiled. 1,000 echoes of you don't belong here condensed into one single gesture. Her eyes stung. She fought the tears, but they came anyway, hot and unrelenting. Not for Marcus, not even for herself. For every woman like her who had stood proud, only to be cut down before a crowd too cowardly to intervene. The sob caught in her chest, and the room swam. She was naked in her pain, stripped bare before pearls and diamonds. The people around her sipped champagne as if her anguish were another piece of art to observe. Her knees wobbled. Robert gripped her arm, steadying her. His own eyes glistened. He couldn't hide it now. They were both raw, exposed. And then, from somewhere deep, a voice clawed its way out of her, cracked, trembling, but unstoppable. I held your mothers when they were sick. I comforted your fathers when they died alone. I kept this city alive while you slept in silk sheets. And now you shame me for daring to stand here? Her voice broke on the last word. The tears streamed freely down her face. No, the shame is yours. The gallery trembled in that silence. For one flicker of a moment, Marcus's smirk faltered, but the damage was done. The humiliation was a brand seared into her soul, and as the guard stood firm, blocking her way, Nia knew they hadn't just tried to push her out of the gallery. They had tried to erase her existence. And yet through her tears, through the brokenness, she was still standing. The chandeliers glittered, but to Nia, they mocked her. Their brilliance only sharpened the darkness, swallowing her soul. She stood in the center of the gallery, her silk scarf clutched in trembling fingers, her dignity unraveling thread by thread. The guard's voice cut through the silence. Ma'am, you need to leave. It wasn't a request. It was a sentence. Robert's hand gripped her arm. He stood tall, his jaw locked, but she felt the quake of rage in his body. He wanted to fight, yet he knew one raised fist, one wrong move, and history would repeat itself. A black man condemned, a black woman erased. Marcus Thorne, standing with champagne in hand, was the conductor of this cruel symphony. His smirk dripped with victory. He raised his glass to the crowd. Robert, my friend, let's not ruin such a delightful evening. Surely you understand. Understand? The words sliced through Nia. Yes, she understood. She understood what it meant to be made invisible, to be told she was unworthy, not by law, but by sneer, not by chains, but by nods from men like Marcus. The guard stepped forward, his hand brushing her elbow. The touch was light, but it felt like fire, like centuries of rejection compressed into one moment. Gasps echoed around the room, not of horror, but of entertainment. They weren't seeing art. They were watching her degradation. Her grandmother's stories came back of being shoved from buses in Alabama, her mother's tears after patients refused her touch. And now, here she was, in New York City, under chandeliers, carrying their scars in her skin. The decades had changed nothing. Robert roared, "Don't you dare touch her." His voice cracked like thunder, but it trembled too, knowing his fury could only feed their narrative. He was a man chained by the lie of civility, forced to swallow his fire. Nia straightened, her tears streaked, but her voice carried steel. "Don't touch me." The room froze. Her defiance was a spark in the hush. She turned to Marcus, her voice low, shaking yet sharp enough to cut. "Every eye here saw what you did. They will remember." Marcus's smirk faltered for a second, just a second. Then it returned, smug as ever, but the unease in his eyes betrayed him. The guard gestured again. This way, ma'am. And so the march began. Step by step, she crossed the gallery floor, her heels striking like gunshots in the silence. Each gaze pierced her flesh. Some pitied, some judged, most enjoyed. It was a walk of exile. Her scarf trailed behind, no longer protection, but banner of defeat. She kept her chin high, though every step cut deeper. She would not let them see her crawl. From the crowd, a pearl-draped woman whispered too loudly. Well, that was uncomfortable. Her companion chuckled. Necessary. That word stabbed deepest. Necessary. As if her erasure was duty. Robert followed, fists clenched, fury shaking his bones. At the door he turned, eyes blazing. Cowards! Every last one of you. His voice thundered, but the silence swallowed it whole. The glass doors opened. Cold air rushed in, biting at Naya's wet cheeks. Behind them, laughter resumed. Glasses clinked. Music swelled, as if her humiliation had been nothing but a brief intermission. On the sidewalk, neon blurred through her tears. She clutched her scarf to her chest, trembling, not from cold, but from the centuries pressing down on her shoulders. Robert faced her, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I should have. She cut him off, ragged but sharp. Don't apologize for their sins. Her gaze lifted to the glowing gallery windows above, where her humiliation was already forgotten. And in a voice torn yet unyielding, she whispered for herself, for her grandmother, for every silenced ancestor. They cannot erase me. Her body shook, her heart bled, but the words held. Survival itself was defiance, and in that defiance she remained unbroken. The boardroom was a cage of glass and steel, its skyline view marking the storm boiling inside. Robert Whitmore stood tall at one end of the table, his jaw locked, hands clenched, the veins in his neck trembling with fury he could no longer contain. At the other end, Marcus Thorne reclined casually in his leather chair, sipping bourbon like it was a victory toast, his smirk sharpened into a weapon. Robert, Marcus drawled, you should be thanking me. I cleaned up the mess your wife made. This firm doesn't need charity cases in designer dresses. His voice oozed arrogance, every word slicing through Robert like acid. The room went deathly silent. Assistants froze. Interns dared not breathe. Even the ticking of the clock seemed to hesitate. Robert's fist slammed the table, rattling glasses. You humiliated her in front of clients, Marcus. My wife, my partner. She built her life clawing against every barrier this city put in her way. And you reduce her to a spectacle because of her skin, because it feeds your sick hunger for control. His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with a raw, protective rage. Marcus laughed low, poisonous. Oh, come on. You know how this city works, Robert. Appearances, money, skin tone. I didn't invent the rules, I just enforce them. He leaned forward, eyes glittering cold. And deep down, you benefited from them, haven't you? The accusation was a gut punch. Robert's silence burned. For years he had floated in circles of power that Nia had to fight tooth and nail to enter. And Marcus knew it. The smirk widened. You can't have it both ways, Marcus sneered. You don't get to be the righteous husband in public while cashing the checks built on a world tilted in your favor. She's not like us, Robert. She never will be. The words detonated in Robert's chest. Rage surged, grief tangled with guilt, and his throat ached with unscreamed truths. His body trembled with the need to lunge across the table, to break that smug jaw, to silence Marcus once and for all. But something stronger than fury held him back. The knowledge that Marcus's poison wasn't just personal, it was systemic. If Robert lost control, Marcus would win. The system would win. So he leaned in, voice steady but vibrating like thunder before the strike. You're right, Marcus. I have benefited, and that's exactly why I won't stand silent while you spit on the woman who's had to bleed for every inch of respect. She deserves this seat more than either of us ever did. Marcus's smirk faltered, just a hair, but enough. The boardroom held its breath, sensing a crack in the armor. Robert's voice, low and sharp, cut the air clean. This ends here. You won't erase her, not while I still draw breath. The silence was no longer submission. It was the hush before a revolution. The night after the gala, Nia sat in silence. Not the silence of peace, but of suffocation. Every word Marcus spat at her replayed in her head, charity chic, out of place, unworthy. She could still hear the muffled laughter of men in tuxedos, women in sequin gowns, their gazes slicing through her like invisible blades. Humiliation had a smell. She realized it clung to her blouse, to her hair, to her very skin. She wanted to scrub it off, but the sting wasn't on her body. It was under her ribs, where shame and fury tangled until she could barely breathe. Her eyes fell on a photograph taped to the refrigerator door. Her grandmother in Selma, battered shoes, Sunday dress torn, but chin raised like a warrior. Those eyes seemed to stare straight through time into her soul. And something inside Naya shifted. She broke. And then she burned. All those years she had played their game, smiling through insults, working twice as hard for half the credit, wearing clothes that screamed sophistication but whispered, "Don't fear me." And still, they branded her as less. The realization hit like cold steel. Excellence had never been enough, and never would be. So why keep kneeling? With trembling hands, she stripped off the silk blouse she had worn at the gala. It landed on the floor like dead weight. Standing there, in nothing but her cotton undershirt, Nia felt raw, unarmored, and truer than she had in decades. For the first time, she was not hiding. That night, she opened her laptop. The words poured out, not carefully polished, not softened for their comfort, but jagged and blood-raw. She wrote of every locked door, every smirk that cut, every opportunity stolen because her skin said no before her voice said anything at all. It wasn't just her story, it was the story of generations. The story America pretended not to hear. By sunrise, the page glowed on her screen. A manifesto, a wound laid bare. With one breath, one defiant click, she sent it into the world. And the world answered. Her inbox exploded. Strangers wrote, "Your scars are mine." Black nurses, Latina teachers, Asian mothers, even white allies' voices woven into hers, rising louder, fiercer. The humiliation Marcus tried to bury had become an uprising. For the first time in weeks, Nia smiled. Not with sweetness, but with teeth. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a reckoning. New York didn't wake gently that morning. It jolted upright, choking on smoke, not from fire in the streets, but from truth set ablaze. Naya's words had detonated. Her testimony wasn't an article. It was a weapon. The city held it in trembling hands, every sentence dripping acid on the polished marble of the elite. On Wall Street, suits read it with clenched jaws. In Harlem, grandmothers whispered her name like a prayer and a curse. On the subway, her voice seemed to echo off the steel walls. They dressed me in silk, only to strip me of dignity. They gave me a seat at the table, but kept the knives pointed at my back. Marcus stormed into his boardroom, face red, fist slamming. Shut her down, but he was already bleeding. Hashtags roared across Twitter. Church choirs turned her sentences into hymns, and bartenders quoted her speech like scripture. That Sunday, Naya climbed the pulpit. No makeup, no jewels, just fire in her eyes. "You cannot erase me," she cried. "For every woman you trampled, for every hand you stole, for every name you buried, I am their voice. And I am not alone." The crowd rose as one, stomping, shouting, some weeping openly. The sound was not applause, it was uprising. Marcus watched the broadcast. His empire shook. Nia smiled. Her chains were ash. The sky had split open, and the storm was hers. The ballroom glittered like a palace, but beneath the chandeliers, unease slithered. Everyone had read Nia's words. Marcus, once untouchable, now stood brittle, his smile stretched too thin. Then the doors opened. Nia entered, not draped in jewels, but in a plain black dress that carried more weight than diamonds. The room stilled. Conversations broke. Champagne flutes hovered midair. She wasn't there to blend in. She was there to strike. "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus hissed, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Leave while you still have dignity." Her reply cracked the silence. "Dignity? You stole mine the night you thought my skin made me less." Gasps tore through the hall. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, hungry for the clash. Cameras rose, capturing every flicker of the storm. Nia's voice rose, fierce and steady. You built your empire on silence, on broken backs, on women you thought too small to fight. But tonight your reckoning begins. Marcus tried to laugh, but it rang hollow, brittle as glass. His hand trembled around his champagne. The crowd was no longer with him. They were riveted by her, by the truth slicing through decades of lies. Robert moved beside her, steady and proud. His words sealed it. This era of silence is over. The hall erupted. Applause thundered, echoing like judgment. Marcus's glass slipped, shattering at his feet. For the first time, he looked small, cornered, irrelevant, and Nia, scarred, defiant, unbroken, stood victorious, the wound, now a weapon. The morning after the gala, New York was no longer the same city. On subway platforms, strangers locked eyes and nodded silent recognition that something had shifted. In Harlem, old men who once marched with Dr. King sat in barber shops, their voices breaking. Finally, someone bled our truth out loud. Downtown, women in crisp suits whispered Naya's words like scripture. But the backlash was vicious. Hate letters arrived at her doorstep, scrawled with poison. Go back where you came from. Her employer received threats. Friends hesitated to be seen with her. The system Marcus belonged to wasn't dead. It was wounded, cornered, and dangerous. Still, Nia refused to hide. She walked the streets of Manhattan not as prey, but as proof. Each step was a sermon. I am still here. Cameras followed, crowds gathered. A single woman, once humiliated before them all, now walked like she carried the weight of centuries, and she did. Marcus, meanwhile, crumbled in public view. His empire rotted from lawsuits, his allies scattered like rats. But the true punishment wasn't legal. It was the silence. Once, every room bent to his voice. Now, he spoke and no one listened. He was a relic, stripped of relevance. Yet Nia knew victory wasn't just his fall. It was in the echoes. Churches rang with her defiance. Nursing homes brimmed with tears as elders told stories they had buried for decades. A janitor whispered to her after a speech, "Because of you, I stood tall when my boss called me boy." Wes. The fact at 5. The legacy grew beyond her control. In classrooms, children recited her words. In protests, her face appeared on signs, not polished, not saintly, but scarred, raw, unbroken. She hadn't asked to be a symbol, but pain had carved her into one. And yet, in her quiet hours, she still felt the sting the night her dignity was ripped away, the jeers, the glass shattering at her feet. Those wounds never vanished. They burned, reminding her of the price. But she learned, a scar is not the end. A scar is the skin refusing to die. When she stood once more before a crowd, thousands now, she didn't roar. She spoke with a voice forged in fire. They tried to strip me of dignity. They dragged me across marble floors like garbage. They called my skin a curse. But I am still here. Scarred, yes. Broken, never. And if I rose, then so can you. Every one of you. The crowd didn't clap. They wept. They shouted. They reached for each other's hands. In that moment, Nia was no longer just a woman. She was every wound America tried to bury, ripped open and made holy. And somewhere, in the ruins of his empire, Marcus Thorne watched not with rage, but with the hollow terror of a man who realized he had lost the war, not to courts, not to money, but to a voice he could never silence again. This is not just Nia's fight, it is our fight. Every insult she bore, every door slammed in her face, is a wound carved into the soul of America. But wounds can be turned into weapons of truth. We cannot stay silent. Silence is betrayal. Stand with her. Stand with every voice silenced by hate. If this story shook you, let it move you to act, like, share, and subscribe our channel. Let this message echo louder than prejudice, farther than fear. Thank you for being here, for not looking away. Together, we rise.